We are so pleased to have three Sisters of Life here today, as we said earlier. So this afternoon is really special because Sister Mary Margaret Hope was here with us 2 years ago and spoke, and it is so exciting that she is back again with us. It's always exciting when friends come back. And so we're going to welcome her up to the stage, and her talk is entitled, "The Feminine Heart, Virgin, Bride, and Mother." Join me in welcoming Sister Hope.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. It is such a joy to be back here in Helena. I had so much fun 2 years ago that I jumped on the chance to come back here. And it's such a grace to be the last talk of the day, too, having heard so many beautiful things from all of our speakers and really themes that have been repeating themselves and really going deeper in our hearts. And so I just want to kind of wrap it up by going deeper into these themes we've really been talking about the feminine heart and our call to relationship. And I want to focus on a slightly different three than Nicole did, but very much in the same spirit. So that's why I entitled my talk, "The Feminine Heart, Virgin, Bride, and Mother." Now, men and women are very different, and we know this. But this was really brought home to me one time when our sisters were out driving and their car broke down. And they were on the side of the road. They didn't have a cell phone, didn't really have any way to call for help, nothing to fix the car with. So they're just kind of standing on the side of the road, wondering what to do next. And a man was driving by, saw them, thought, I'm going to come to the rescue. And he's pulled his car over, came to the car. He's like, "Sisters, what's wrong with the car? I think I can fix it. Let me take a look at it." Brings his tools, starts tinkering around. But it's very clear that he couldn't fix it, so he kind of wrapped up his tools and said, "Sorry, sisters," drove away. Then a woman drove by, and the woman got out of the car. She said, "Sisters, how are you? Are you okay?" She was carrying water bottles and granola bars. This is the difference between men and women. Men care about cars, but women care about people, Her heart was oriented to the person. Like, how are you, sisters? Do you need me to help you? And I think that, Sister Beata talked about what it means to live in right relationship. And I want to talk more specifically about the gift that we have as women to live in that relationship. That is so essential to the feminine identity. So I want to begin with virginity. And I hope that as a religious woman consecrated to virginity, that I might have something to share on this point. Because sadly, the concept of virginity has been so reduced in our culture. Most people think of it just as a physical status, something to be lost. But it's so much more. When our church speaks of virginity, it speaks of a sacred spiritual reality. The Holy Virgin saints, they have a high place in heaven among the choirs of saints. And the highest place of all is held by the Virgin Mary. Virginity is a holy and a sacred reality. Now, I know that many of you here today are married. Your mothers, grandmothers, maybe even great-grandmothers. And you might think, well, that's really beautiful, sister, but that has nothing to do with my life now. But when I want to talk about these aspects of the feminine heart, I'm not talking about consecutive stages that a woman passes through at different parts of her life, but things that are essential to every woman's heart and how we were made. Cardinal Cantalamessa said, "Virginity liberates marriage and each of the partners from the unbearable weight of having to be everything for each other, of taking the place of God." I think that's a theme we've heard a few times today. And many of you are married to wonderful, faithful husbands. You have marriages filled with challenges, but are ultimately deeply intimate, loving, and fulfilling. But the truth is we all experience loneliness in our lives. You know, there's this uncomfortable emptiness inside of us, even in the midst of the best support and the best friendship. But you know what? That's okay. It's a universal experience, even in the happiness of marriages. And it can be tempting to try to fill this void within us. And what do we fill it with? The noise of our culture. You know, whether it's social media, internet, television, all these things in our deafening culture that we try to fill ourselves up with. And there's other things, too, that we can fill our hearts with. You know, maybe it's our own plans, our desires, restless self-seeking, even just plain busyness. But my sisters, this is a terrible mistake. The loneliness, the emptiness that we experience is not a bad thing. You know, virginity in our culture today is often seen as a lack, a deficiency, something to be avoided. But the emptiness of the virginal heart is actually of capacity. It's the capacity to receive. And that is a part of every woman's heart. A spiritual author, Carol Houselander, she once said, "It is not a formless emptiness, a void without meaning. It has a shape, a form given to it by the purpose for which it was intended. The emptiness in our hearts is like the emptiness in a reed, which can have only one destiny, to receive the piper's breath and utter the song that is in his heart." Isn't that beautiful? That our goal is to discover the particular shape of the emptiness of our hearts so that we can discover how God wants to fill it. And so even though for most women, physical virginity is a transitional stage that we pass through in life, and it is fleeting, what it also is an icon. It's a symbol of an eternal reality. It's something that reminds us of an essential truth of what it means to be a woman. You know, I was serving in our mission to college students in Denver, and we had the great gift to attend many weddings of the students that we had walked with during their years of college. And at one of the weddings, the sisters were asked to bring up the gifts, and we were so happy. We were like beaming like proud mamas, carrying up the gifts at this wedding, watching this beautiful young couple make this definitive gift of themselves in the sacrament of marriage. And I can still see the image of that bride, you know, walking down the aisle, dressed in white, the color of purity. And isn't it interesting that even today, when so many people no longer value saving sexual intimacy till marriage, brides still want to wear white. It's this universal desire because it's a symbol. And watching that young Catholic woman who had fought to preserve her virginity in the midst of this culture and so many temptations, standing there at the altar, ready to give the gift to her bridegroom, this gift of her emptiness, of her receptivity, her capacity to receive him into her heart, which had never received another, which had never belonged to anyone but him. How beautiful. What an image and an icon that is. Now, many women have made mistakes in their past, perhaps have not preserved their physical virginity, and God is so merciful, and he has the capacity to restore that ability to receive in all its fullness to the feminine heart for a woman on her wedding day. But the truth is that every woman, no matter her marital status, no matter her stage in life, has that capacity to receive, of which virginity is the icon that illustrates it most clearly, but it's in all of us, this capacity to receive. And we have to learn to value this emptiness, to nurture it, if we are going to live our vocations as virgins who are ready to receive another within. Because virginity is essential to all of the vocation of women. Archbishop Fulton Sheen said, "If God in his wisdom chose in one woman to unite virginity and motherhood, it is because one is destined to illumine the other." And we know that Mary has united these aspects in the perfect way. She is virgin, bride, and mother. And that's why she's the perfect model of love. Because the highest form of love is the pure, sacrificial, spiritual love, the love to which every person, both in marriage and virginity, is ultimately called to. So what makes love virginal? What makes it pure? Virginal love is non-possessive. It maintains the space to receive another, but it doesn't seek to own him or her. It proceeds from what's called a contemplative outlook. This is a phrase from St. John Paul II in his encyclical, The Gospel of Life. He says, the contemplative outlook is the outlook of those who do not presume to take possession of reality, but instead accept it as a gift. Think of approaching a flower in a garden. You know, the virginal heart appreciates the delicate beauty of the petals of this flower in the garden, but it doesn't need to pluck it out, to destroy it. And that's how we're called to approach others, with reverence, ready to receive the gift that they are to us, but we don't need to possess them. That's such a beautiful thought, that every person that we meet is a gift from God to us. Every single person is a gift for us to receive, not to hold on to, not to gain mastery over, but to receive. And I can remember experiencing this kind of love from my mother. You know, as a child, I would spend hours in the basement in my art studio making art out of, toilet paper rolls and paint and Scotch tape. And my mother probably would have called it making a mess, not making art. But my mother rarely came down to the basement to see what I was doing. I think it was probably more peaceful for her not to know. But I knew that I had total freedom in my little space to do as I wished. But when I brought up to my mother one of my little creations, she would ooh and ah, and she'd hang it up on the wall, and I knew that she would receive it and me, and then let me go back to my mess again. And that was a kind of virginal mothering. And you've probably experienced the opposite of this in your life as well. Maybe your husband or your child has come to you, but you were preoccupied with something else. Your head was full of anxieties and plans, and you couldn't receive him or her the way that you would have wanted to. Or maybe you don't notice when a friend or a coworker is isolated or feeling low because you're so wrapped up in your own self. Or maybe you've caught yourself trying to fill up that emptiness in your own heart by treating your child as a possession, being controlling, forcing your own goals or dreams, or basing your own self-worth on her successes. But spiritual virginity allows us to live a pure love. It allows us to foster the emptiness, the waiting in our hearts that allows us to truly receive another. And it's also the secret to prayer, to contemplative prayer, because the virgin posture is the posture that we need to take before God every time we come to pray, empty and ready to receive what he has to give us. And we have to let go of our own expectations, our desires, our plans, and let him speak into our hearts. But the fortunate thing is, this is actually a natural gift of the feminine heart. This is how we were made. And that's why I think that actually there are more women contemplative than men. It's just a fact. If you look at the saints, women are just naturally good at this. So, just saying. But I want you a little bit of encouragement today to examine your heart. Is it empty? Is it virginal? And if not, what is it occupied with? Is there room for God in it? What is the shape of your emptiness? How does God want to fill it? So the next aspect of the feminine heart that I want to look at is more at bride. We've been speaking a lot about this beautiful mystery today. And the feminine heart is made to love this way. And most are called to do so within the sacrament of marriage, but it's much more fundamental than that. But what does it mean to be a bride? Now, in Ephesians, St. Paul says that women ought to be submissive or subject to their husband. They ought to obey their husbands as they would Christ. Now, I know when I read this, it kind of rubs me the wrong way. I'm like, wait, what? Modern women were like, what does that mean? I mean, what if my husband is wrong? What if I really do know better? Why should I submit to him? This doesn't make sense. Now, I'm not married, at least not in an earthly way, but I offer you my wisdom as one who has taken a vow of obedience. And while it's true that my spouse is never wrong, and he always knows better than me, he has this really frustrating habit of communicating his will to me through fallible human instruments. Now, oftentimes, your way might actually be more effective, more efficient, but there's a power in choosing to submit your will to another, and that's the power of love. And our redemption came through Jesus' obedience. Not my will, but yours be done. And I want to share a powerful story that one of our sisters told me about obedience. And she was serving in our mission in New York City to pregnant women in crisis. And she was walking with a woman who was very tempted to abortion. And I'll call this woman Caitlin. And the sister met with Caitlin, and she talked to her. She talked through her fears, offered her support, encouragement, really tried to help her believe in her goodness and her capacity for motherhood. And they spoke regularly for days, but at one point, Caitlin said to her, I just need space to think. Leave me alone for the weekend, don't talk to me, and that way I can make up my mind. So this sister spent the weekend in an agony of love, waiting, praying, hoping that this woman would make the right choice. And on Monday morning, she reached out, to check in with Caitlin. No response. She kept trying all day. No response. At this point, this is just terrified. What if she gave in to the pressure and the fear, and she went ahead and had the abortion? It was a hard day. And that night, she went to bed, and she was trying to, kind of console herself a bit. So she pulled out her favorite book, and she's reading it, at night. And it's kind of helping, and she gets to, this really good part. And all of a sudden, she looks at the clock, and it's 10 o'clock. Now, in our community, we have a rule that at 10 o'clock, you turn out the lights. And so the sister's having this little, internal struggle, I just want to keep reading, but it's 10 o'clock, but I'm not even going to be able to sleep anyway. I'm so, anxious about Caitlin. What does it even matter? It's just a little rule. But eventually, she said, all right, I'm going to be obedient. And she turned out that light at 10:03. And the next morning, she got up, and she checked the messages on the phone. And there was a message from Caitlin. And it was sent at 10:04 p.m. And it said, "Sister, I'm not going to have the abortion." Coincidence? Maybe. But I think that is the power of obedience, even on a little thing, an inconsequential matter of turning out a light on time so that she could get enough sleep and get up early to pray. Won this grace for Caitlin to surrender her own will, her plans for her life, and say yes to this invitation to love by giving life to her child. And that's why obedience is not just about being submissive, it's about love. It's about choosing the will of another above your own out of love. The virgin is ready to receive, but the bride gives herself away. Because a bride is no longer at the center of her own world. She doesn't put her own desires and interests first. Now, this doesn't mean that a marriage shouldn't be a partnership of equals. that both parties don't need to surrender their plans, their preferences, their wills, be submissive to one another at different points? Of course they do. Women are not meant to be walked all over. But I think that it's a special gift of the feminine heart, something that we excel at, to be oriented towards another, to be ready to sacrifice our own wills, because that's what real love is. And this is what our hearts were made for. This is the kind of love, this gift of self, that really shows the greatness of who woman is. And a good wife is always conscious of her husband at some level, whether he's actually there at a particular moment or not, whether she's busy doing something. Some part of her is aware of him, maybe not thinking of him actively, but holding him in her heart. She's attentive to his needs, his struggles, his concerns. And I want to show you a short video, maybe we can pull it up now, which I think exemplifies what bridal love looks like in the hard times, which is also when it's most glorious. And this is the story of friends of ours in New York, Kristen and JJ Hansen, and they had a beautiful life. You know, a happy marriage, a new baby. But then the dreaded happened. JJ was diagnosed with terminal brain cancer and given months to live. And it's interesting, JJ's diagnosis was the same kind of cancer that several very well-publicized cases of physician-assisted suicide revolved around, including that of Brittany Maynard, which you may have heard of. And there was pressure for JJ to make this same choice, to spare Chris the pain of watching him diminish and die slowly and painfully. But they didn't make that choice, and they made a choice to fight the cancer as long as they could, and they treasured the miraculous extra years that they won for their family. And then Chris loved her husband through the hard times of his last illness in a beautiful way. So I want to show you this video, which just shows the greatness of bridal love.
And he wants to make it a better place. He said, Chris, we got to share this to help other people. They need to know that it's okay for this to happen. And don't be afraid. I started tearing up and I said, only you, James Joseph Hansen, are worried about other people in this moment. He only has about 4 weeks left to live.
Yeah.
And that was a week ago. The end of September, he got depressed and there was no hope at this point.
I was done. Done. But now, we're gonna keep going.
It's been hard to advocate for JJ. I'm his healthcare proxy. He chose me because I think he knew that I would think, what would JJ want? And I would ultimately fight for him, but I would also let him go. All we can do is today, right?
Yeah.
And we can make today the best we possibly can. We had 3.5 years now when they first only gave you 4 months.
We are in love with each other. No worries.
Always and forever. Try to hold on to hope. For yourself, for those around you, for people you don't even know. And it could be changing their life and you don't even know. You can't think about assisted suicide in one situation. You have to step back and think about who it could hurt because it puts so many people at risk. And that is the danger with assisted suicide. You'll never know. If you make that choice, if you do that, you might have lived like JJ. He had 3.5 good years, so many beautiful moments we've shared as a family. James has gotten to know his daddy. He knows who his daddy is now. We have Lucas. The joys that we have been able to experience in these 3.5 years are too many to count. And when I stop for a moment to think of if we had listened, if we had given up hope, we would have missed out on so much. Lucas requires so much care and love right now. He's dependent on me for everything. And I do it with joy. I take care of him with joy. And why is that so different at the end of life? Every moment we can share together is a gift.
So I show you that video, as hard as it is to watch, because Kristen never imagined her marriage would look like that. And yet, tragic as the story is, it's breathtakingly beautiful to see. Love lived well to the end. And it moves the heart, because that's true greatness. That is what the feminine heart was made for, to love to the end, in the hard moments. Women were made for great, great love. And so finally, I want to look at motherhood, at the fruitfulness of our love. And St. Edith Stein said that God combats evil through the power of a woman's maternal love. And this power exists independently of her marital status, but is present simply by the fact that she is a woman. It's an extension of her very nature. Because women were created to nurture life, to foster it and recognize its potential. You know, one of our sisters told me about an experience she had living with our moms at our Holy Respite mission in New York. And one of our guests was drying off her little 3-month-old baby girl from the bath, and she got a bottle of baby oil, and she said, I give her a massage every night. I start with her toes, and I go all the way up. And she was spending a long time on every little toe. So the sister was like, wow, you do this every night? You're kind of spoiling her, don't you think? And the mom stopped. She looked at her and said, in total seriousness, she works hard all day. And the sister kind of paused. She's 3 months old. She's in major spit-up mode. In fact, she just spit up on me 4 times today. The baby works hard all day? And the mom said, yes, she's very active, and she tries to stand. She works really hard. And then she turned back to massaging the little foot. And I like to think about this story when I've had a hard day, and I kind of picture the Blessed Mother looking at me with this tender look, saying, hey, you're doing great. You tried to stand today. I mean, this is what mothers do. This is why motherhood is so needed. So I want to thank each and every mother who is out here today for what you are doing. Thank you. Thank you for bringing life into the world. Motherhood is a great responsibility, but we don't need to be afraid of it because we're bound to make mistakes. That's the truth. But if we stifle the fruitfulness that God wants to give us, we will stifle life and the amazing thing that God wants to do with our love, even in our darkest moments. We saw that with Chris and JJ. Their suffering actually brought forth new life, literally. If they had given up hope and chosen assisted suicide, their youngest son would never have even existed. But I want to talk about another example of the fruitfulness of maternal love. And it's a story of a modern working mother who wasn't perfect, but participated in God's design to bring forth life. And this woman, her name was Azalea, and she had a wonderful husband, several beautiful daughters, ran a successful business from her home. But I think that the best illustration of her feminine genius is how she handled the trial of her middle daughter. And unlike her very obedient older sisters, this child was really difficult. She might have been a little bit autistic. She definitely had some developmental delays, behavioral issues, and her mother really struggled to understand this difficult child. Why was she so disobedient? Why did she keep getting sent home from school? But she loved this difficult daughter with all her heart. and she received her as she was, with all her struggles and peculiarities, nurturing her with this maternal care and holding out to her this goal of holiness. But over time, she started to notice that things were getting worse, that her daughter's behavior was getting more and more erratic. She was acting out constantly. She wouldn't listen to anything her parents asked of her. Now, this woman, who was a busy working mother, had entrusted her daughter to a nanny. And unfortunately, that nanny was abusing her position. She was kind of playing power games, punishing the child if she obeyed anyone except for her. And I can only imagine what Azalea felt when she found this out. She must have felt like a total failure as a mother, like she was so caught up in her work that she didn't notice that someone she trusted was tyrannizing her daughter. I don't know what she thought, but I know that she trusted God's mercy in it. And she fired that nanny and began this slow process of regaining her daughter's trust, showering her with love and affection. And although her daughter continued to struggle for many years, eventually she found herself. She achieved the vocation God had destined her for and achieved sanctity. Thanks, I think, through the love of her mother. Now, some of you might have recognized this story. It's the story of Saint Zélie Martin, the mother of Saint Therese. And she and her middle daughter, Léonie, had a pretty rocky relationship at one point. But now, Zélie is a saint, and Léonie's cause is also open for beatification. And I find that so encouraging because this is a mother who wasn't perfect, but nevertheless, she loved with a feminine heart, and it was incredibly fruitful. I mean, the Martins might be the first entire family to be canonized. So maternity is this fruit of the feminine heart, and God just needs our yes to bring life into the world, just like he needed Mary's yes at the Annunciation. So we've looked at these three aspects of the feminine heart: virgin, bride, and mother. So we might ask this: how do I foster this more in my own heart? Well, all that is beautiful in the world reflects the beauty of God, but woman reflects it most perfectly. John Paul II said, "In woman is contained the final word of God our Creator. In creating woman, the crowning beauty of creation, God triggers humanity's great aspiration for beauty." Woman is beautiful. It's written in our hearts, this deep longing, this quest for beauty. And women also reflect something of God's sacredness in a unique way. It's actually no accident that in many cultures, women traditionally wear veils. Even our biology reflects this sacredness. The most intimate parts of a woman, in contrast to men, are physically veiled. They are hidden. So we need to start carrying ourselves in a way that befits our dignity. And I don't mean that you all need to start wearing veils, but that you need to protect your feminine hearts, to examine your relationships, to see who you're sharing the intimate feelings and thoughts of your heart. Does that person have the right to receive them? Is he your husband or just the reader of your blog? You know, if you have friendships with men, who are they leading to? Where are they leading? Are they enhancing your ultimate vocation? Your friendships with other women, are there unhealthy, oversharing codependencies in them? These are all beautiful ways to protect our hearts. But the most important thing is be gentle with yourself. We're so critical of ourselves, our appearance, our homes, and social media just encourages us to be constantly comparing ourselves. We're never good enough. But your heart is so delicate, and that's what makes it so lovely. You're not perfect, but you're doing your best, and that's enough. So when that role of self-criticism starts running in your head, ask yourself, would I say that to my daughter? Would I say that to my little sister? Then don't say it to yourself. Don't say these things that hurt your heart. Don't ask more of yourself than God is asking of you. He didn't come to condemn you for not living up to the impossible standards that you set for yourself. He knows your struggles and your triumphs, and he's so pleased with you. He knows what it took for you to get here today, and it's his great joy to have spent this day with you. So Jesus said to St. Angela, Make of yourself a capacity, and I will make myself a torrent. So let's live our femininity. Let's live our spiritual virginity, emptying ourselves of all that is an obstacle to God, to live as brides, attentive to his promptings, submissive to his will, and then he will make us fruitful spiritual mothers, bringing life into the world. So dive deeply into this, in the remainder of this day, as you absorb all that you've heard today. Let God speak this truth into your heart, that you are a beautiful, feminine daughter of God, and that's who you are, and that's who you were made to be. Thank you.